Now let's get into some terminology related to theory. When we're talking about theories, we use a couple different key terms. The first is construct. Construct is the term that we use to describe the pieces of a theory, the factors that are hypothesized in a theory as predicting behavior change. So an example of a construct would be self-efficacy. That is a key construct in the social cognitive theory among other theories, or readiness to change. Now, what can be a little confusing is that we use the word variable once we have measured our construct and have started to analyze the relationship of that construct to our behavior change. So once we have collected data to measure self-efficacy, and we are putting it into a statistical model to see whether or not self-efficacy did predict, let's say, changes in dietary habits, then we refer to the measurement of self-efficacy as a variable. Theories also typically come with a conceptual model that looks something like this. It has a series of boxes, and in each one of those boxes, so in box A and B, we would have the construct depicted, and then box C should be the behavior change, or outcome. And as we learned when we were talking about the components of a good theory, a theory should depict the relationships between the variables, as indicated here by different arrows. Now, theories can be classified in a number of different ways. They can be classified by their level of influence, the theoretical approach, and the underlying assumptions, and we'll talk about each one of these now. Level of influence. This refers to a very popular model in public health called the socio-ecological model, or socio-ecological framework. This framework proposes that there are different levels of influence on a behavior, starting from the most proximal, which is the intrapersonal level. So there are factors internal to an individual that determine whether or not a person engages in a behavior. Then there's interpersonal level factors, so these are relationships with other people that affect our behaviors. Then we have community factors and policy factors, and you can read each one in your book and on this slide. So each theory can be classified by a level of influence. Another way that theory can be classified is by the theoretical approach, and there are two different approaches. The first is the continuum approach. Theories that are classified as being continuum theories are those theories that read kind of like a mathematical equation. They are supposed to work the same way for everybody. So these are the A plus B plus C equals behavior change type theories, and there are a number of examples in this course. So the continuum theory, if you enter any population, you use the theory in the same way. You use A plus B plus C equals behavior change, and everybody is supposed to start at the same place, and the intervention should work the same for everybody. Stage theories recognize that behavior change does occur on a continuum, but they recognize that not everybody is on the same stage in that continuum. And so what stage theories include is a set of categories that people can be classified into on the continuum of behavior change. So more specifically, stage theories include categories that people can be assigned to by their stage of readiness to change their behavior. So on this continuum, we have people who are nowhere near ready to make a behavior change, and then people that actually have made a behavior change and are just trying to maintain that change. So the difference between a stage theory and a continuum theory is that whereas continuum theories propose that this theory should work the same for everybody, it doesn't differentiate between readiness to change. Stage theories say that if a person is in this stage of change, then these components of the intervention and these strategies will work to move them on the continuum. Whereas if an individual is in this stage of change, these other components will help move along the continuum. And so the stage theories really recognize that different processes work at different times for people depending on how ready they are to make changes. And one thing to note is that in stage theories, these theories recognize that individuals in the same categories are experiencing similar barriers or facilitators to change. So for example, people who are nowhere near ready to change, most all of them probably have a lack of knowledge as a barrier. So these people may have no idea that they need to change or that what they're doing currently is harmful to them. Whereas people in this stage of change, so closer to making a behavior change, they really know that they need to make a change, but their barrier may be that they don't have access to the equipment needed to make that change. So the barriers faced by people within each stage are similar, but they're different to the barriers faced by people in other stages. The third and final way that theories can be classified is based on their underlying assumption. And I want to note that this way of classifying theory, so the underlying assumption classification, only applies to intrapersonal level theories. There are two different underlying assumptions when it comes to intrapersonal level theories. So in these intrapersonal level theories, they can take two different standpoints. The first is that individuals act based on instinct. So we can be trained basically to react to a stimulus and engage in a behavior without thinking about it. If we hear a dinner bell, we can immediately go and eat dinner. So it takes out the thought process of a behavior. Now, in contrast, the other type of intrapersonal level theory are called value expectancy or cognitive theories. And these are theories that recognize that a lot of thought and consideration goes into an individual's decision to engage in a behavior. So it's not just an instinct. People actually think about behavior and make a conscious decision about whether or not to engage in that behavior. To conclude, let's talk about the different ways that theory is used. Theory is commonly used in 4 different ways. The first way is that interventions are informed by theory. And what this means is that when I'm designing an intervention, I very loosely base my intervention on a theory. So I've read the literature and I know that this theory called, for example, the health belief model, that's a theory, posits that an individual's perceived susceptibility of developing a disease influences their likelihood of engaging in a behavior. So I read that construct may predict behavior in this theory, and so now in my intervention, I am going to make sure that I teach people their true risk of developing a disease. But I only use that one construct out of the 6 constructs from that theory. So I use that theory very loosely. So that's why we say my study or my intervention was informed by theory, but I didn't technically use it. I just kind of drew from it informally to develop my intervention. I drew from that theory informally to develop my intervention. Next, we can actually apply the theory. So continuing this example, I decide that I'm going to develop an intervention using a theory called the health belief model. But when I apply a theory, I specifically seek to address every construct proposed in that theory in my intervention. So if there are 6 different constructs proposed in this theory, I make sure that my intervention addresses each one of those 6 constructs so that I am developing an intervention that uses the theory exactly as it is designed. Another way that we use theory is to test it. And testing theory sounds similar to applying theory, in that what we do is we develop an intervention or a measurement tool that is strictly based on the theory. So it addresses every specified construct in the theory, and it measures every construct in the theory, and then we test to see whether or not each of those constructs really did predict behavior change. But the difference between testing and applying theory is that when we're testing a theory, we need to test it against something else. And so typically what we'll do is we'll develop an intervention that is based on the theory exactly as it's designed, and then simultaneously we'll conduct a second or third intervention that either is not based on theory at all or that tweaks the theory in some way, and then we can compare the results of those models and see if the theory-based intervention or model really did predict behavior change better than our comparison groups. Now, a similar design can be used to build new theories. When we want to build a new theory, we need to know if it works better than an existing theory. And so what we'll typically do is we'll design an intervention or a measurement tool based on an existing theory, and then simultaneously we'll develop an intervention or a tool based on our new theory that we want to propose, and we'll run them simultaneously and see which one worked better. So if our new theory explained behavior change or created behavior change better than the old theory, then we may have succeeded in developing a new theory. Now, throughout this course, we will see examples of each way that theory is applied.